the 10 most expensive paintings ever sold. Number 10, Garçon à la Pipe, Pablo Picasso, $129.3 million. Spanish artist Pablo Picasso's 1905 oil on canvas painting depicts a young Parisian boy who is holding a pipe in his left hand while sitting with a wreath of beautiful flowers on his head. First bought by John Hay Whitney, U.S. ambassador to the U.K. in 1950 for $30,000, now the equivalent of $291,000. The painting was then sold at Sotheby's auction house in New York City in May of 2004, fetching a total of, when inflation altered, $129.3 million. The buyer was not named, although many people claim it may have been Guido Baria, owner of the Italian food processing company the Baria Group. Number 9. Bal du Melon de la Galette, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, $142.1 million. Bal du Melon de la Galette is an 1876 masterpiece by French Impressionist artist Pierre-Auguste Renoir. Regarded as one of Impressionism's most celebrated artworks, Renoir's painting depicts a normal Sunday afternoon in the Melon de la Galette district of Montmartre, Paris. Although originally in the collection of French painter Gustave Caillebotte, it moved into the hands of the French Republic when he died and was hung in the Musée de Luxembourg before being moved to the Musée du Louvre and then to the Musée d'Orsay. However, the honorary chairman of Daishowa Paper Manufacturing in Japan, Ryoei Saito, purchased the painting for the equivalent of $142.1 million at Sotheby's auction house in New York in 1990. Number 8. 3 Studies of Lucian Freud by Francis Bacon, $143.1 million. Irish-born British painter Francis Bacon is renowned for his emotive paintings, and his 1969 oil-on-canvas triple work, 3 Studios of Lucian Freud, is no different. Freud is shown sitting on a cane-bottomed wooden chair within a cage from 3 separate angles in the trio of paintings, which are sometimes regarded as Bacon's best work. Sold for a value equivalent to $143.1 million in November 2013 at Christie's auction house in New York. They were purchased by Elaine Wynn, the ex-wife of former Las Vegas business magnate Steve Wynn. Number 7. Portrait of Dr. Gachet, Vincent van Gogh, $150.1 million. Japanese businessman Ryohei Sato regularly splashed cash on classic artwork, and Vincent van Gogh's 1890 portrait of Dr. Gachet is the second on the list that he purchased during his lifetime. There are 2 authentic versions of this painting, but with different shades, and it was the first one of the doctor who took care of Dutch painter Van Gogh in the last years of his life, which Saito paid so much for. At an auction at Christie's in New York in May of 1990, just 2 days before he spent the equivalent of $142.1 million on Bal de Melon de la Galette, Saito bought this painting for the equivalent of $150.1 million from the descendants of German-American banker Siegfried Kramarski. That meant that in the space of 3 days, Saito spent almost $300 million on 2 paintings. Number 6. Portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer I by Gustav Klimt, $156.4 million. Austrian symbolist painter and Vienna secessionist Gustav Klimt painted his first portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer I in 1907. The painting of the Viennese salon lady was first stolen by the Nazis during World War II, before being claimed by Klimt's family during the 1950s. Interestingly, though, American businessman and art collector Ronald Lauder bought the work for his New York museum, the New Gallery, in 2006, paying the equivalent of $156.4 million for the luxury in a private sale facilitated by Christie's auction house. Number 5. Le Rêve, Pablo Picasso, $156.5 million. Pablo Picasso's second entry on the list, Le Rêve, portrays the Spanish Cubist 22-year-old mistress Marie-Thérèse Walter, a work he is said to have completed in 1 afternoon. Purchased for the equivalent of $111,300 in 1941 by American businessman Victor Wendell Gantz. The 1932 oil painting was then sold to Christie's auction house in 1997, seemingly to an Austrian-born investment fund manager, Wolfgang Fladel, for the equivalent of $70.5 million. He then sold the painting on to casino magnate Steve Wynn for the rumored $80 million in 2001. However, the painting, which is considered extremely erotic due to the fact Picasso's erect penis allegedly makes up the top half of Walter's face, was then bought privately by American hedge fund manager Stephen A. Cohen for the equivalent of $156.5 million in March of 2013. Quite a lot of money for a picture of a man's private parts, isn't it? Number 4. Willem III, Willem de Kooning, $160.3 million. Dutch-American abstract expressionist Willem de Kooning painted Woman III as part of a series of 6 works of one specific female between 1951 and 1953. Part of the collection at the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art between 1978 and 1994, Woman III could not be shown in public following the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Traded in 1994 by Swiss art dealers Thomas Amann Fine Art to American music tycoon David Geffen, the work was then bought privately by American hedge fund manager Stephen A. Cohen. His second painting on the list, in November for the equivalent of $160.3 million. Number 5, 1948 by Jackson Pollock, $163.3 million. Number 5, 1948 is a painting by American abstract expressionist painter Jackson Pollock. Created on fiberwood using liquid paints, the painting has then been changed a couple of times by the artist due to the fact it was damaged when bought in 1948 by Filipino-American painter Alfonso A. Osorio. Exchanging hands between Osorio, U.S. magazine magnate Samuel Irving Newhouse Jr., and collector David Geffen over the next 58 years, the work was finally purchased through a private sale engineered by Sotheby's Auction House. Supposedly bought by Mexican investor David Martinez, the work sold for the equivalent of $163.3 million in November of 2006. Number 2. The Card Players, Paul Cézanne, $270.5 million. French post-impressionist painter Paul Cézanne created a series of 5 oil paintings under the title of The Card Players during the early 1890s. The versions vary in size and number of players depicted, but one painting in the series is the second most expensive artwork in history. With the painting depicting provincial peasants smoking pipes over a game of cards, Greek shipping magnate George Imbirikos added it to his vast collection. However, shortly before his death in 2011, Imbirikos sold the masterpiece privately to the royal family of Qatar for a then world record sum equivalent of $270.5 million. Number 1. When Will You Marry? By Paul Gauguin, $300 million. So here it is, the most expensive painting in history, and it was only sold in February 2015. French post-impressionist Paul Gauguin's 1892 masterpiece Na Fea Fa'a Ipoipo, or When Will You Marry, depicts 2 Tahitian women in missionary clothing and primitive dress. After spending nearly 50 years on loan to the Kunstmuseum in Basel, Switzerland, businessman and art collector Rudolf Senchalin sold the painting privately for a reported $300 million in February of 2015. Although the buyer remained private, it is again believed that the royal family of Qatar purchased the painting, meaning the Gulf state now boasts the 2 most expensive artworks ever sold. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe for more amazing videos.